These are the Freewell ND filters for the DJI Avata 2, and in this video I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about them. And Freewell did send me these filters, but I'm not sponsored by them. I've used Freewell filters on my drones for years before they sent me anything, and their filters are what I use on pretty much all of my drones. So if you're watching this video, you probably already know that you want ND filters for your Avata 2, but if you're wondering why would I even use ND filters, the real reason is to get natural looking motion blur, which is especially important for FPV because you're flying close to things with a lot of fast motion in the frame. When you're flying in bright light, especially full sun, you're going to need a high shutter speed to get the correct exposure, and using such a high shutter speed will result in a lot more choppy looking motion, and ND filters just cut down the amount of light that's coming into the camera, which lets you use a lower shutter speed and get more natural looking motion blur. On the Avata 2, I shoot most of my footage using a 1/60th of a second shutter speed with a 60 frames per second frame rate if I'm going to be using that footage in real time on a 30 frames per second timeline. Now you might think that it would make more sense to shoot 30 frames per second with a 1/60th of a second shutter speed, but if you shoot at 30 frames per second, it reduces the frame rate that's getting transmitted to your goggles and makes it a lot harder to fly confidently and precisely and not run into things. And if you want to get all of my settings for getting the most cinematic shots with your Avata 2, I put together a PDF checklist with the best cinematic settings, which you can download for free. The link is in the description, so make sure to check that out. So that's what ND filters generally are for, if you didn't already know that. But what about these particular ND filters? So far I've been using them for probably a month or two, and they do work really well. There isn't really any color cast to them that I've noticed, and they clip onto the drone pretty well. They're a little hard to get on and off, but that's actually a good thing because you don't want them to fall off when you crash. And if you haven't found out yet with the Avata 2, especially if you're flying in manual mode, you will crash. I've crashed dozens of times with these filters on, and only one time I've had a filter pop off and lost it, and that was where I ended up running into a tree quite a ways up, tumbled all the way down, and I didn't actually realize that the ND filter had popped off until I'd already picked up the drone and moved it from where it crashed. And so Freewell also sells these filters individually, so I just ordered another single filter to fill my set back out. But aside from that one crash, I've crashed a whole bunch of times and quite hard, and they are really pretty solid and tough. I haven't broken one of these even in all of those crashes, which I'm actually almost a little bit surprised at, but that's actually another one of the biggest reasons to use ND filters on the Avata. If you crash and hit the camera on something hard and you have an ND filter on it, the ND filter might crack, but it will protect the camera lens underneath. Now I haven't had that in particular happen with my Avata yet, but it has saved other drones from breaking the camera lens. And Freewell also has a clear filter that you can use to protect the lenses from crashes when you don't want to have an ND on there, and I'll usually throw that onto the drone if I don't need to have particularly perfectly cinematic footage, for example if I'm practicing or whatever, so I still have the lens protected if I crash so that it won't get scratched or broken. And Freewell also has a polarizer filter for the Avata 2, but polarizers aren't really something I use and don't really recommend for most people. Now, one problem with these NDs that I have run into is that you get some extra reflections and lens flares with the NDs versus without them, but I don't really think that's a problem that's specific to these Freewell NDs. I think it more has to do with how curved the Avata 2 lens is. The lens on a lot of camera drones is essentially flat, whereas on the Avata 2, because it has such a wide angle, it's slightly curved, and so I think that allows more room for light to bounce around between the ND filter and the lens, and it's not really a super big deal, but just something to keep in mind. And these filters also tend to get quite a few fingerprints on them, but again, that's kind of a general problem with ND filters and the way these clip onto the Avata 2. Just the way DJI designed the ND filter mount for these, you almost inevitably will end up touching the ND filters at some point and taking them on and off, and then you got fingerprints. Now Freewell does include a microfiber cloth with these ND filters, which is a nice addition. Now just looking at the Amazon listing for these Freewell filters, it looks like they've updated the design to where it has a little handle on both the top and the bottom, so it's easier to take on and off, and you'll be less likely to get fingerprints on your ND filters. So Freewell, good job on figuring out how to improve the design. Anyway, all in all, I can 100% recommend these ND filters. They're essential kit for the Avata 2 if you want to get the most cinematic shots. And if you want to get these ND filters, I will put a link to them down in the description. And if you do use that link, it doesn't cost you any extra and helps to support this channel. And one question that people are always asking me when I talk about ND filters is which ND filter strength should I use on my drone in what kind of lighting conditions. So on the Avata 2, the ND filter that I end up using the most is the ND16. That's what I use most of the time when it's sunny, nice, bright lighting. That gives me about the right exposure with a 1/60th of a second shutter speed. And because I use that filter strength so much, I've now actually lost it twice and I need to get another replacement right now. And then I'll typically use an ND8 when the lighting isn't as bright, for example, around sunrise or sunset, or if it's a little bit cloudy. And then the ND32, I'd mostly reserve that for really, really bright situations, for example, flying over snow or really bright sand. And the ND64 is the filter that I use the least. To me, it's just too dark for most situations. And if you want to learn how to get pro-level cinematic shots with your drone, whether that's the FPV drone like the Avata 2 or a regular camera drone like Air 3 or Mini 4 Pro or Mavic 3 Pro, and want to learn all about how to edit your videos, color grade them, best settings to use, how to compose your shots, all that good stuff, I have a completely free 45-minute drone filmmaking training where I share my top 10 secrets to cinematic drone shots, and the link to that is down in the description as well. Make sure to go check that out if you want to get the most cinematic shots with your drone. Again, it's completely free. And if you do want to go even deeper into how to get pro-level videos, I do have an entire 10-hour drone filmmaking course as well, where I go in depth into my entire drone filmmaking process. And of course, link to that is in the description as well. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button for more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next video.